When you've been doing something for a long time, you come up with all sorts of ways to do it better.
I mean, for example, working techniques, shortcuts, systems that make the jobs flow smoothly. I'm Elliot Coleman.
And I'm Barbara Damraj. And if you'll stay with us for the next half hour, we'll show you some landscaping techniques to make your yard more livable.
On Gardening Naturally.
To make our yard a blend of the natural countryside and a place for outdoor living. Some parts of it are kind of formal, but even in those, we've tried to use as many natural materials as possible.
And we've done most of it by hand, with a few tricks of the trade. Here are some of the techniques and materials we've used to put it all together.
Elliot and I are still working on this part of the property. We've put in a nice shrub border next to the fence, and we're gradually developing a woodland shade garden below that. And it's next to the lawn and the badminton court, and that's where we have a little problem, because we need to extend the lawn a little further so that we can walk around the post that holds the net up to go from one side of the court to the other. So what we've decided to do is give this bed a nice naturally curving edge to go with the informal style of the planting. Now you're probably wondering why I'm standing here with a garden hose. Well, I've discovered that the best way to get a graceful curve on a bed is to do it with a garden hose. So I'm just going to lay this down any old way. Now the great thing about this technique is that I can now play with it, fiddle with it, fine-tune it, till I have it just the way I want it before I do anything drastic like edge it or plant my grass. Okay, let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think I've got it. Okay, I'm going to make a little trench next to this hose and set the hose in that furrow to hold it. And then what I would do is take my grass seed and then I'd sow it through here. And when I got all that done, I'd take a nylon tooth rake it in. And then once that's all done, I could remove my hose. And then I'd let the sod grow. And when I felt that I had a good sturdy turf, then I'd do my edging. And Elliot's doing that in another part of the garden right now.
One thing I know about grass is that it always wants to grow where you don't want it. And the way to prevent it is to decide where the edge is going to be and put it there. Now I'm using a spade. I think it's the best edging tool. But I'm using it to cut sod. And since I'm using it to cut, I want the edge to be sharp. And I actually take a file and sharpen this edge every so often as I work. Now I understand I'm poking it down into the soil. There may be rocks there. It's going to get dull. But better that it gets dull and I sharpen it again than it never having been sharp in the first place. The next step then is to take my little hand fork and go along the edge I've created and just take out the sod that is snuck past where I want it, knock some soil off it if that's necessary, and put it in my bucket. And just work my way along slowly like this. Knock off the extra soil, put the side chunks in the bucket, and I'm left with a nice, neat look to the edge of the lawn. Now, the grass is going to keep invading, and I'm going to have to do this again, depending on the vigor of the grass and the soil, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. But it's really worth it if you want a nice, neat look to the edge of the garden.
Vines are an important part of the landscape, and I think they're particularly beautiful when they're clothing the side of a house. They'll even give you some protection against the hot sun in the summertime. But it's important to know what kind of vine you can grow in a house and what kind you can't. Things like ivy that have the little holdfasts that cling right to the masonry or the wood, those can eat away at your house. You're better off with a twining vine, and one that's not too heavy, one that can be supported by a simple structure. This is a trellis that Elliot and I built. It's actually on another show in this series. And what we did is put a little hinge at the bottom so the whole thing can come down flat away from the house in case we want to paint it or something like that. Right now it's supporting several vines that are among my favorites, especially this Trumpet Honeysuckle. This is a native vine, native to the northeast United States, blooms in summer, and the beautiful thing about it is these red-orange trumpet-shaped flowers that are pollinated by hummingbirds. The hummingbird's long bill gets down inside those little tubes to get the nectar and pollinates the plant, and I love to attract hummingbirds to my garden. It's an easy vine to grow, no special requirements. It's doing fine in the dappled sunlight right here next to our maple tree. It'll twine by itself. Sometimes I'll come in and say, okay, vine, I'd like you to go like this and, you know, sort of make it go where I want. But don't even have to do that if I don't want to. Same for this clematis. It's just doing its thing, beautifully wrapping itself around the trellis with this soft growth. And just look at those white flowers. They're about the size of salad plates. This is Clematis lanuginosa candida. There are a lot of different kinds of clematis. I have another one over here called Clematis jackmanii, and it has very dark, rich purple blossoms. There are many different kinds of clematis, and I really urge you to get to know them. Some of them are even American natives. They're easy to grow. They like a little lime scratched into the soil. The only tricky thing is knowing when to prune them. These two bloom on the current year's growth, so I can prune back some dead wood in early spring right to the base of the plant, and I'll get a whole new plant each year. But there's others that would bloom on wood made the previous season. And those, if you prune them at all, you'd want to do them right after flowering. And that's all there is to it.
This is a poor area of our lawn that never did very well. And it has two problems. It's too low, so I'm only scraping the bad stuff off very shallowly. I don't want it any lower. But also, the grass that grew is not anything I'd be proud of. The good stuff we sowed obviously didn't catch very well. And I want to make this better. Now, if I had a lot of topsoil, I could fill this in and reseed it, but I don't have topsoil. But I do have something that's even better and quicker. Barbara and I recently created a new flower bed in the lawn. And in doing so, we cut it very carefully in 1-foot squares, slid it off so it's about inch and a half thick. And I've prepared this area so I can set these sides in here just as if I were laying tile. What this gets you is an instant lawn of really well-established, beautiful grass. And if part of it is high, like that corner back there, well, I'm in charge here. I can just take my trowel, cut that away, and so it then sets down the way I want it. Now, you may also want to put some in areas that aren't as nice and straight as this. In that case, just take an old pocket knife and just cut this into any shape you want, and then put it in there. I mean, this is really fun. You get to come out here and put in sod where it didn't look nice, and 5 minutes later, it's beautiful. But there's one important thing to remember. The roots on this have been severed from the ground underneath, and you want them to make contact with this new ground here. And the key to that is water. So for the next couple of weeks after you do this, keep this area really moist, really well watered. The sod roots will go down in and connect to the soil, and you will have as quick, simple, and instant a new lawn as you could ever want.
Elliot and I decided that we wanted a patio underneath the overhanging branches of this maple for those few days in Maine when it's hot enough to need some afternoon shade. We wanted something that looked very relaxed and natural looking, nothing as formal as brickwork or stone. So we decided to make some rounds of cedar and cut them about 3 inches thick and make them the basis for our little terrace. Now, you could use any naturally rot-resistant wood. Locust would work, anything that's not endangered. It may not last forever, but as they rot, they're only going to deteriorate in a graceful way, and maybe sooner or later you can replace them. Anyway, it's a fun project to do, and I wouldn't mind doing it in another 15 years if I have to. The thing I did first is to take out the topsoil and level this whole area. I just took some strapping lumber like this, put a level over it, and got it more or less level. I'm not being too meticulous about this. It's a casual terrace. Then I put some sand here. This makes a good bed for drainage. We were very concerned that plenty of moisture and air get down into the roots of the maple. That's one reason we chose a material like this that had some holes in it. We're also planning to put some plants in between these, in these wonderful little planting pockets that we have conveniently here. Now, as I do this, the sand also enables me to move this around so that I'm getting this pretty well level. Now, the next step is to create our little planting pockets. What I have here is some commercially bagged compost. And the nice thing about it is that I know it's not going to have any weed or grass seed in it, so that my little plants are going to get a good head start without any kind of competition. So I'm just poking those into these little holes here and patting it into the cracks to make my little pockets. Okay, now I thought quite a bit about what I wanted to plant in here. And this creeping thyme is usually a sun-loving plant, but Thymus serpillum, this is coccinea, a red variety, will take some shade. So I thought that might be a good one to at least try. And I think these will make nice little carpeting plants in here. Another thing I'm going to try is this Labrador Violet, which will self-sow here and there and trail around, and I think that might work out well. I think the most fun thing of all that I'm going to plant is this collection of mosses that I got out back in the woods. I'm going to see if some of these will grow in my pockets. They may not all work, but I can certainly give them a try. I think those look wonderful already. One thing, it's a little difficult when you have these flat pieces of moss. They might take a while to establish, and you don't want to scuff them up when you're walking. So this is a trick I picked up from a book by Christopher Lloyd, a British plantsman. He took ladies' hairpins, the old-fashioned kind, and tacked moss to his roofs. I made my own out of pieces of wire, and I'm just going to poke that in there and hope that that will stay. It's going to be fun watching all these little plants take hold. But I already have a terrace that's inviting, natural-looking, and wonderful for those 2 days in the Maine summer when it's hot.
The lawn is an important part of many people's landscapes. I like it because it acts as a counterpoint to the borders around it. It's sort of a frame for them, and I like to keep it green. And the best way to do that is to come out here in August when the sun is hot and you begin to see these weak spots in the lawn where it's turning a little browner than the rest of it. Well, the reason it's doing that is because the fertility there isn't as high as it is in other places, and it isn't holding moisture as well. And the best way to correct that for the long term is to add some more fertility there in the form of compost. Compost will give a nice layer of fertile soil on top of the ground, and it will also help the soil hold more moisture. And I sprinkle it right over the bare areas, and I do it in August when I can tell where they are. I'm going to forget if I don't do it now. And then I use the rake to just mix it in. If I left it there like that, it would smother out the good grass that is there. And what I'm trying to do is create better conditions for that good grass so it can continue to grow. And so I just use the teeth of this garden rake to work that right down in there like that. Now you can see the grass is growing through it, and I have made a permanent improvement here. I've improved the fertility. Next year, there won't be a bare spot there. I like to use this same rake for smoothing non-growing mediums like this gravel. Unlike other grading rakes, which have straight teeth, this one has teeth on an angle, and I find they're much more effective and much less strain on me at smoothing out a material like this and putting it into just the shape that I want to get it in.
Sometimes a lot of your landscaping efforts go into hiding stuff. Ugly things like big gas tanks or the electric meter. Now, we had a problem with our electric meter. It had to go right on this post, right in the front yard where you look out the front door. So we decided to plant something in front of it. Now, we could have built a sort of a screen or a box or something, but the man has to come in and read it. It has to be accessible. And the nicest thing is to use a plant. Now, you might put a dense evergreen and hide it all together, but that really isn't necessary. You really just want to distract the eye from what's behind. So this rhododendron worked fine. We even could have used a deciduous plant, like a tall lilac or a viburnum, some shrub like that. The important thing is that when you look here, you don't see the box behind. You're looking at a rhododendron.
Mulch for your garden is something on which you can often spend a lot of money, when actually a lot of it is available for free. In the area where I live, when the power company or the road crew thins along the edge of a road, they have a chipper behind the truck and they blow it into piles like this. And it's really a beautiful product. Well, I asked the neighboring landowner if he minds if I take some. He said, no, go right ahead. And so I've come out here with my favorite tools for the job, a shovel and this wonderful folding bag. It can sit in the back of my car wherever I go, and yet when I want to fill it up with a product to take it home, I have something that'll hold a lot of material. Now, I happen to know this has been sitting here for about 2 years. It's composed mostly of spruce and fir, and look at that, it's already beginning to compost. Well, there is a group of organic growers in France who believe that what they call brushwood compost is actually one of the best things you can put on your garden, taking a bit of the forest and putting it into another setting. And another year or two, and this is going to be pretty nice brushwood compost. But for the moment, it's going to make a great mulch for flower beds or whatever, because even if I never compost it, it will continue breaking down on the surface of the soil as it makes everything look pretty. If I can get a resource like this, just by keeping my eyes open along the side of the road, hey, I'm not going to go buy anything.
Gardeners are getting very resourceful these days about reusing all of that plastic that the nursery industry always throws at us. If you buy as many perennials as I do, chances are you're going to accumulate a lot of these little pots. And there they are, stacks and stacks of them sitting in your attic, your garage, your basement, or wherever you keep stuff like that. I find a lot of them are very useful. These little ones are good for starting seedlings, or if I want to move my seedlings up to a bigger pot, say my hollyhocks or my delphiniums or my tomatoes, where I want to get extra big plants before I set them in the garden, sizes like this are extremely useful. But you can only use up so many of them if you buy an awful lot of plants. So the best thing to do is to contact the nursery where you bought them or some other nursery that will take back plastic pots. You may find that they will even give you some money for them, a nickel or a dime. It all adds up. In any case, just to have them take them off your hands and reuse them is wonderful. These things, too, you may find you have stacks and stacks of those. If you buy a lot of annuals, they put about 8 or 10 little trays of annuals in these. Well, if you've got them and want to reuse them, I find that you can put seedlings here in the spring in your peat pots or your soil blocks or whatever. The roots will come through those holes unless you take something like this cut-up plastic bag from the supermarket, line it with that, and then set your little pots on there. And that works very well. Take back to the nursery if you've kept them in good condition. Now, the big pots, these are the ones I really like. This is what shrubs or trees come in when you buy them in the nursery. Some of them even have these wonderful little handles that make them easy to pick up. But I find this is a great catch-all to put those small tools in, the little trowels and clippers and scoops, the kind of tools that wander around the property and get lost in the shrubbery. And this can just, you know, follow you around the yard so that you have a good place to put stuff. But the best thing of all, I think, is to use these big guys as weed buckets. This is so lightweight that I can just carry this around me from place to place as I'm crawling along the edge of the garden and put my weeds in. Then when I'm all done, carry it over to the compost heap, dump the weeds in. Works great.
Like most gardeners, we're learning all the time, and it's a cumulative process. The techniques we've shown you on this show are ideas that we were beginners at once, but every time we use them, we tried to learn a little more about how to make them more efficient. Paying attention is the best way to learn to use new landscaping ideas.
Now, take this terrace, for instance. I think this has been a very successful experiment.
I sure agree, Barbara. It looks beautiful.
We added a very simple little barbecue arrangement here, just made out of rows of granite blocks. And I've been keeping track of what happens to these little creeping plants. The thyme is finished blooming, but it's putting out some new growth, and the violets are doing very vigorously. The moss, though, Elliot, some of it isn't here anymore.
Well, there's a very good reason for that. Ever since we built this patio, it's become a favorite spot for our family to come and have a cool drink in the afternoon or even to eat meals. And that means a lot more foot traffic. Some of the plants can take it, the moss obviously can't. It still looks nice on the edges where we haven't walked, but where there's a lot of feet, it isn't going to make it. And so we're going to learn from that.
That's right. And I want to watch the whole thing for a year and see which plants really creep in to fill the spaces and which don't. And maybe try some different species again next spring and see how they do.
And you, too, should try new ideas at home and keep track of how they work, because that's the best way to learn to become a better landscaper.
For now, goodbye and good gardening.
Next on TLC, doing something for your home can be easy, even fun. Check and see here on Homebodies. Then, add value to your home with some serious improvements. The Home Pro shows you how.